Rumblefish, Chapter 6. That afternoon turned out to be more interesting than I'd bargained for. I got expelled, and Patty broke up with me. I went to school about 1 o'clock. I had to check in at the office and let them know I was there. I told them I had been sick that morning but was okay now. They didn't believe me, but I wasn't going to say I'd been to a beer blast till 5 in the morning. I had done the same thing lots of times before, so I was surprised when instead of giving me a pass back to class, I was sent in to see Mr. Harrigan, the guidance counselor. Rusty, he said, shuffling through some papers on his desk to let me know I was taking up his valuable time. You have been to see me before. Yeah, I said. I can't stand for people to call me just Rusty. It makes me feel like I'm not wearing my pants or something. Too many times, he said. I was wondering what was coming. I mean, I didn't go in there and waste his time on purpose. All they had to do was quit sending me there. We have decided that we can no longer tolerate your kind of behavior. He went on to list all the things I'd been sent to the office for that year: fighting, swearing, smoking, sassing the teacher, cutting classes. It was quite a list, but I already knew about it. He acted like he was telling me something I didn't know about. My mind went kind of blank. There was something about Mr. Harrigan that made my mind go kind of blank, even when he was swatting me with a board, like he had two or three times before. All of a sudden, I realized he was kicking me out of school. We have arranged for you to be transferred to Cleveland, he was telling me. Cleveland High was the school where they sent everybody they didn't like. That didn't bother me. But Biff Wilcox and his gang ran Cleveland. Since our fight, Biff and me had left each other alone. He stayed in his neighborhood, I stayed in mine. But if I just walked into his home territory, I was a dead man. It'd be me against half the school. Biff had had his chance to fight me fair. He wasn't going to try that again. Sure, I'd go to Cleveland. All I needed was a submachine gun and eyes in the back of my head. I don't want to go, I said. Look, I've done lots of things worse than cutting school for half a day. Why now? Rusty, he said. They are equipped to handle your kind in Cleveland. Yeah? They got bars on the windows and bulletproof vests? He just looked at me. Don't you think it's time you gave some serious thought to your life? Well, I had to worry about money, and whether or not the old man would drink up his check before I got part of it, and whether or not the motorcycle boy would pick up and leave for good. And I had a cop itching to blow my brains out. Now, I was getting sent to Biff Wilcox's turf, so I didn't have much time for serious thinking about my life. I gave some serious thought about punching Mr. Harrigan. I mean, they were kicking me out anyway. But I was still a little hungover, so I decided not to waste the energy. You start at Cleveland next Monday, Rusty, Mr. Harrigan said. You are suspended until then. I won't go, I said. The alternative is the youth detention center. He rattled his papers again to show that my time was up. The youth detention center, big deal. Those guys had a lot of paperwork to get straightened out before they came after me. I had weeks to think of something to do before they showed up. I left his office with the intention of heading straight for his car and slashing his tires. But I ran into Coach Ryan in the hall. Rusty James, man, I'm sorry, he said. He really did look kind of sorry. I told them you were a good kid, he said. I told them you never gave me any trouble, which was a lie since I gave him trouble. He just tried to laugh it off. But it didn't do any good. I couldn't talk them out of it. Don't worry about it, I told him. He looked at me like I had been sentenced to death. He must have really thought I loved that school. I didn't. But my friends were there, and it was easier to go to than some place where Biff Wilcox's friends were. Kid, he said to me, don't go getting into trouble, okay? I must have looked at him like he was nuts because he went on. I mean, trouble you can't handle. Sure, I said, and added, man. It made him so happy. I hoped to hell when I was grown I'd have better things to do than hang around some tough punk, hoping his rep would rub off on me. It really felt weird not being able to stay in school. I had always found something to do in the summer though, and over Christmas, so I figured I'd get along. Nobody was in Benny's besides Benny, and even though he was better than nobody, I don't like shooting pool without an audience. I went down the street and over a couple of blocks to Eddie and Joe's bar. A couple of guys who used to be in the Packers hung out there. But as soon as I went in, Joe, or maybe Eddie, threw me out. Then I tried Weston McCauley's place. He was there with some other people, but they were all spacey and nervous and dopey, doing horse. Junkies can't stand to be around straight people, so I left, feeling really sad because Weston had been second lieutenant in the Packers. He had been the closest thing to a friend than the motorcycle boy had. The motorcycle boy didn't have any friends. I realized when I got over being sad about Weston. He had admirers and enemies, but I never heard anybody claim to be his friend. Then it was time for Patty to be getting home from school. She went to an all girl Catholic school. Her mother didn't want her to be around boys. Patty thought this was really funny. She was the kind of girl who had boyfriends when she was 9. I waited for her at the bus stop, smoking a cigarette and fooling around, smarting off to people passing by. You'd be surprised at how many people are afraid of a 14-year-old kid. Patty hopped off the bus and went swinging on by me like she didn't even see me. Hey, I said, dropping my cigarette and running a couple of steps after her. What's up? She stopped sharply, glared at me, and really told me what I could do. What's with you? I asked her. I was getting mad myself. I heard all about your little party, she said. I must have looked as blank as I felt. She went on. Up at the lake? Marcia Kirk was there? She told me all about it. So what? What does that have to do with anything? Do you really think you can treat me like that? She started off swearing at me again. I wondered where she learned to swear so good, then remembered she'd been going with me for 5 months. What does a dumb party have to do with anything? I heard all about you and that girl, that black haired tramp. She was so mad she couldn't even speak for a second. Just get lost, she said finally. Her eyes were shooting sparks. I don't want to ever see your face again. Don't worry, you won't have to, I told her, and added a few comments of my own. I almost slapped her. Then, when she went stalking on down the street, her hair bouncing on her shoulders, her head up, a tough, sweet little chick, I thought how I wouldn't be going over to her house to watch TV anymore. We wouldn't hug close, trying to make out without her little brothers catching us. I wouldn't have her to hold anymore, soft but strong in my arms. I couldn't see what messing around with the chick at the lake had to do with me and Patty. It didn't have anything to do with me and Patty. Why would she let something stupid like that louse us up? I felt funny. My throat was tight and I couldn't breathe real good. I wondered if I was going to cry. I couldn't remember how crying felt, so I couldn't tell. I was all right in a little bit, though. I just walked around for a while. I couldn't think of anything to do or any place to go. I spotted the motorcycle boy in the drugstore reading a magazine, so I went in. You got a cigarette? I asked. He handed me one. Let's do something tonight, okay? I said. Let's go over to the strip across the bridge, okay? All right, he said. Maybe I can get Steve to go too. I wanted Steve to go in case the motorcycle boy forgot I was with him and took off on a cycle or went in some bar where I couldn't go. All right. I stood there and looked at the magazines for a little bit. Hey, I said, what are you reading? There's a picture of me in this magazine. He showed it to me. It was a picture of him, all right. He was leaning back against a beat up cycle, kind of propped up on his hands. He was wearing blue jeans and blue jean jacket and no shirt. He and the motorcycle were against a bunch of trees and vines and grass. It made him look like a wild animal out of the woods. It was a good picture. A photograph that looked like a painting. He wasn't smiling, but he looked happy. Hey, I said, what magazine is this? I looked at the cover. It was one of those big national magazines, one that went all over the country. Is there anything about you in here? I looked through the magazine again. No. The photograph is one of a collection by a famous photographer. She took my picture out in California. I'd forgotten about it. Actually, it was one hell of a shock to open a magazine and find my picture in it. I looked at the other photographs. They were mostly of people. They all looked like paintings. The magazine said that the person who took them was famous for her photos looking like paintings. Wow, I said. Wait till I tell everybody. Don't, Rusty James. I'd rather you didn't tell anybody. God knows it's going to get around soon enough. He had been acting a little weird ever since he got back. He had a funny look on his face now, so I said, "Sure." It's a bit of a burden to be Robin Hood, Jesse James, and the Pied Piper. I'd just as soon stay a neighborhood novelty, if it's all the same to you. It's not that I couldn't handle a larger scale, I just plain don't want to. All right, I said. I knew what he meant about being Jesse James to some point. The motorcycle boy was very famous around our part of the city. Even the people who hated him would admit that. Hey, I get it, I said. The Pied Piper. Man, those guys would have followed you anywhere. Hell, most of them still would. It would be great, he said, if I could think of somewhere to go. As we were leaving the drugstore, I saw the cop, Patterson, across the street watching us. I stared back at him. The motorcycle boy, as usual, didn't even see me. That is really a good picture of you, I said. Yes, it is. He was smiling, but not happy. He never smiled much. It scared me when he did.